Are you threatening me? Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. Now I hope all of you are having a very joyous celebration of Armed Insurrection Day. This being the 248th anniversary of Armed Insurrection Day, also known as July 4th. And this being the year of our Lord 2024. Today is a celebration of July 4th, 1776. The day when the Declaration of Independence was officially ratified and accepted by the Constitutional Congress. It had actually been written and voted on a couple days before, but the delegation from New York was not allowed to vote on its approval because they had not received instructions from their state government to do just that. Now, as a reminder, as I mentioned last year, this event, the adoption of the Declaration of Independence, happened 442 days after the first shots had actually been fired on April 19th, 1775 at Lexington and Concord in Massachusetts, when British soldiers were sent out to confiscate arms and ammunition from the colonists. Arms and ammunition that they required to protect themselves from savages who were hell-bent on robbing and pillaging and raping their way through any community that they could. Now, these savages weren't all just red-skinned. There were also white-skinned savages that would do this stuff also. I'm having a bit of deja vu, aren't you? People needing arms to protect themselves from savages who are coming to rape, burn, loot, murder. I suppose now we're just waiting for those redcoats, aren't we? But when they show up, they'll probably be wearing all black or potentially all green, depending on which part of the United States you're in. Now, we are 123 days away from Tuesday, November 5th, Election Day. A day that I still believe we're not going to have the election. I still believe there's going to be some excuse on why we can't hold the election at this time. You know, we need to hold off for people's safety. You know, it could be because of World War III, armed insurrection, it could be a new scamdemic. You know, they have been talking quite a bit about the bird flu coming from cows and how we're going to catch it from milk somehow. I mean, they really do seem to be desperate to try to find a reason to potentially hold off the election on. You know, we're not going to know for sure till probably November 4th if there's going to be an election the next day or not, but I still believe in my gut that we're not going to. I hope that we will. But that brings up another thing. Do any of us really believe that we're going to get a real result? Seriously? We've seen what happened in 2020 on camera. And we've all been gaslit how many times that we didn't actually see what we saw. Do you think it'll be any different this year? Now, it may not be Mr. Potato Head who's going to be on the ticket, you know. We don't know who the Democratic candidate really is going to be. But is it going to matter? Is there truly that many people in the United States that believe they're better off under Democrat rule than Mr. Cheeto Head and Donald Trump? I have a writing here that I wish to read to you. Some of you will recognize the verbiage and you'll know what it is. Some of you will not because of our poor education system. I'll do my best to read through this. Some of these words can be a little tough for me because they're no longer used in the current vernacular. Plus, there's also changes in spellings also I found too, reading through this. I'll tell you the significance of this document at the end. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which compel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established shall not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be attained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise. The state, remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and has sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us, in times of peace, standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures, and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burned our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with the circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, and to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections among us, and has endangered to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their nature, justice, and magnanimity. And we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow their usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war and in peace friends. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America and General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. That is the act that was ratified today on July 4th, 1776. The Declaration of Independence. I know many of you have never heard it, never read it. Well, here you go. I printed this off from the National Archives. This is how it is worded in there. Now, the Declaration of Independence was not signed lightly by the representatives sent to the Congress. There were 56 signers to the Declaration of Independence. Included among these were 24 lawyers or jurists, 11 merchants, 9 farmers and plantation owners. The rest were a mix of aristocrats and common folk. All walks of life getting together to decide on the future of this nation. Now, this was not without consequences. Of the 56 signers, 12 had their homes ransacked and burned. 2 lost sons in fighting in the Continental Army. 2 had sons that were captured in the fighting. 9 of the signers fought and died during the war. 5 were captured as traitors and tortured, one of which recanted signing the Declaration of Independence after torture in order to get the torture to stop. Eventually he was released, and he did give a new oath of citizenship to his state during the war. One signer was a merchant, a trader. He owned a small fleet of ships. The British relentlessly hunted those ships and sank them. Tried to ruin him economically, and most likely did. There's a note that another signer, who was chased away from his dying wife's bedside. He had come to visit his wife as she was dying. British troops arrived to arrest him, and he and his 13 children had to flee, leaving his dying wife there alone. I want you to think about that, because some of you still say that if something happens, you can't take up arms because you have bills to pay. You have a job to go to. You have a business to run. You have a farm to plant and harvest. You have a family to protect. Don't you think those 56 signers had the exact same thing you did? But they reached down, grabbed themselves by the nutsack, gave it a big old yank, and said, fuck it, enough's enough. Now, I'm not telling you to go out and do anything illegal. I am not telling you to go out and attack people. I am not telling you to go out and kill people at this time. What I am telling you is that when the moment is here, when patriots are being hunted, not just arrested, hunted, dragged out of their homes, clapped in irons, hauled off to show trials, if they even make it that far, how many of them will probably just be they went crazy and murdered their families and then committed suicide. And then when the neighbors talk about, oh, it was the police that did it, the neighbors just happened to murder their families and commit suicide also. Maybe when those of us who have had enough and have decided that we do have to honor our oaths now, we have to put the uniform back on. We have to pick up arms, lock and load, and go to the field to defend the Constitution that we took an oath to. Will you finally, at that point, join us? Now, I do not believe there will be an election in November. I believe we're going to get some excuse as to why they can't have it. You know, because it'll be too dangerous because of the chicken flu. Or, you know, there's just too much rioting going on. Those evil MAGA extremists are burning cities as they're running around screaming Black Lives Matter and flying, you know, flags of the Soviet Union. You know, clearly the MAGA extremists are out there burning the cities again. Whatever the excuse, I don't think there will have an election. But if there is one, can we truly trust the results? Can we? We all seen with our own eyes what happened in 2020. Coolers of ballots coming out from under the table. After kicking out all the monitors, people taking stacks of ballots, running them through the machines, grabbing them out from underneath from the tray, and then running them through again. And then pulling that stack again and running them through again. In the dead of night. And then all of us being gaslit for 4 years on how what we seen with our own eyes never happened. Do any of you truly believe that we're going to get a fair election this year? Will you believe it when Gavin Newsom wins the election at 3 a.m. on November 6th? Are you really going to believe that he got 84 million votes? How about if Trump does win? Do you think that if Donald J. Trump, the Savior sent by God to protect us from all evil, trust me, I still come across Trump cultists now and they still drive me just as nuts with their stupid fucking cultish behavior. Do you really believe that the political left of this country is going to say, oh shucks, well you know we got beat good, didn't we? You know, next time we need to show up and we need to vote harder the next time to win, don't you know? Do you really believe that's going to happen? Or do you think we're probably going to see what we've seen in 2020 and, you know, what we've seen in January of 2017? Remember the inauguration of Mr. Trump? Leftists foaming at the mouth, screaming, "Yay!" Doing rap videos, holding up freaking bloody heads that are supposed to be Trump's. Now, if anyone did something like that, holding up a head of Joe Biden, or Hillary, or any other Democratic official, that person would be in prison for the rest of their lives. But because it was Donald Trump, you know, it's free speech. Did any of you truly believe that if Trump is declared the winner of this upcoming election, that we are going to have peace? That rainbows are magically going to spread out across the land in the middle of the night? Unicorns are going to come out of hiding and start frolicking across the streets? That the heavens are going to open up, the rays of the sun are going to come down, illuminating Donald Trump. As God says, "This is my son. With him I am very pleased." Do you really believe that fantasy is going to occur? Or do you think it's more likely that we're going to see people take to the streets to burn, to loot, to murder once again? Because they refuse to accept the results of the elections. Now, I still advise that if they burn their own cities, let them. Protect your areas of those cities. When they come to your neighborhoods, maybe that's time to pick up one of these with your neighbors. Stand in those streets and tell those crowds no. And then if they keep approaching, they keep threatening, be a little bit firmer. They start taking shots at you, they start throwing bricks at you and stuff. That's when the safety can go from safe to fire. Not before. There is such thing called escalation of force. Review those laws before the election so that you know how they go. You don't go from telling someone not to do something straight into putting a fucking bullet between their eyes. There are steps laid out under law that you are required to follow. But you have the right to defend yourself. You have the right to defend your loved ones. You have the right to defend your neighbors. You have the right to defend your property. Maybe this time around, instead of relying on a corrupt government to follow through with the laws that they have on the books, maybe we need to stand out there and say enough's enough. Don't approach any closer. Something to think about, isn't it? We have 123 days for you to come up with a decision. And when you find that in that situation, maybe you should take a note from Beavis here on the Gen X battle flag. Are you threatening me? Think about it. Now, today is July 4th. It is a holiday in this country, so I recommend going and celebrating with, very interesting pyrotechnics. And then also enjoying your favorite adult beverages. Not necessarily at the same time. Bad things happen then. Okay, I don't recommend the person that's handling this also be partaking of this at the same time. Use a little common sense. But while someone is having fun with this for the enjoyment of everyone in your area, maybe those ones that are enjoying the display could be enjoying this as well. Hopefully, I will be here for the 249th anniversary of Armed Insurrection Day. And we'll be sitting down and talking about what Congress is doing and how it pisses us off. And not doing a 249th Armed Insurrection Day anniversary followed by reports straight from the front lines of the battlefields across the country. But be prepared. the signs all point to fighting is going to happen after this election, because one side or the other is not going to accept the results. And if the regime does somehow stay in power, do you really think they are going to ever allow themselves to lose power? Do you think at that point that they've now lost the inhibitions to take care of their rivals? For those of you that aren't aware of this, there's actually a crash course program going on right now where we have detention centers being constructed in all 50 states. Now, we used to call these FEMA camps, but now they're being funded in the hundreds of millions of dollars in all 50 states. Contracts are going out for producing massive, massive detention centers everywhere. And they're already hiring staffs for these centers. If they're going through and they're doing that, they're pumping this much money in there, wanting these projects completed as fast as possible. You think they're doing that for something that's going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Or is it more like something that'll be a few months from now? Something to think about. Now, happy 4th of July, happy Armed Insurrection Day. And for all my engineer brothers, for all fellow patriots across this country, always remember, essayons, let us try.